Well, it's good to be back with you again today. This is Mike Yarrington. I hope you've been listening into the prior sessions, and we'll be having more sessions as we go forward. And I want to thank you for listening in. Hopefully you're getting some information, some things that you can use in your business as you build it, fix it, or grow it. And, I'm a business executive with over 40 years experience. I don't want to spend a lot of time on my background because I want to get right into the meat of what we're talking about. But I always tell people, I don't want you to reinvent the wheel. Why not learn from me or others that have been in business for as long as we have, so that you don't have to take the thing you're doing and learn it from scratch. So on occasion, I watch a YouTube video which shows a building collapsing in upon itself, which tells me the organization may not be as strong as it was. So if we're talking about organization today, we're going to be talking about the infrastructure of your organization, which means the things that make it run, things like systems and plant and all those different things. And, I will say this, my wife and I were partners in a business called Hillside Acres Retreat, where we rented cabins. And when we bought the land, it was 25 acres of raw land. And if you go online, you can actually see hillsideacresretreat.com will show you what we built. And today it's 25 acres with 18 buildings on it. We rent cabins there. Our personal residence is there. And I will say this about my wife. She's no longer with us now. She's in heaven, but she was an excellent planner. And so when you get to the infrastructure part of your business, make sure you have somebody that's working with you that understands infrastructure to a detail level, which she did. She used to say, for example, when we were building out our property, she said, I'm in charge of dirt and design. Mike's just a finance guy. And boy, was she right. I was writing a lot of checks as we began to build out the business, but she was doing all the things necessary, building out the water system and the electrical system and the sewer system, all these different things you have to build when you're building out a new structure. And as you look at building that out for your company, make sure you've got somebody in those roles that are helping you build the infrastructure that knows exactly how to get down to the detail level that you need to get to. So all that to say is that looking at and adding in all the important parts of your infrastructure are critical to your success. Don't leave anything out. You're gonna probably, as you're building a business, you're probably gonna forget a few things. We did, certainly, as we began to build out. But over time, you begin to get used to the idea of what an infrastructure should look like and all the components of it. So like someone like me, have someone on your team that does a very detailed oriented look at the detail of the infrastructure. My wife did that for us. And as I've lost her recently, I know that as I look at the details now, I'm not a good detail person. So I thank God for the time that I spent with her, because she was that person that was the perfect complement to me being a big picture guy. She was the detail person. So have somebody like that on your team. It's important that you know the details, and it's important that you don't miss a part of your infrastructure that's going to be important as you scale up your business or fix your business as you go forward. As we go further down the line in looking at the STAR model, let's talk today about the infrastructure of your business. And there's lots of important pieces to a good infrastructure in your business. A good example of building infrastructure is found in Nehemiah 2:17-18, where God had asked Nehemiah to build a wall. And Nehemiah was looking at, and he said this. He said, I said to them, you see the trouble we have in Jerusalem. Jerusalem lies in shambles, and its gates are ruined. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we will no longer be a disgrace. So God was saying to Nehemiah in that situation, hey, you need to rebuild the infrastructure around the wall. And Nehemiah set about organizing, creating a strategy, a vision, all those things we've talked about in the STAR model that he had to do. But he also created an infrastructure where he could rebuild the wall that God had asked him to do. So that's an important part of the STAR model. And today we're going to focus on that. We're going to talk about what does it take to rebuild your infrastructure, maybe to create an infrastructure for a business you're starting, or to recreate a infrastructure for a business you're taking over that may not be going right, maybe failing. So we're going to spend a little time today on the various components of infrastructure, which is found, again, in the STAR model that we've talked about. So first thing is facilities. If you're building widgets or gadgets or some kind of component, the first thing to focus on is your physical plant. Many times when people build businesses, they start off with what they can afford, which may not be scalable, may not be a place where they can grow the business long term, but it may be what you can afford. So there's some balance between what you can afford and what you'd like to have and where you think the business will grow to. So important for you to look at the physical plant of your operation to make sure you don't limit yourself in that area. Next thing people look at is the technology behind the business. What's the infrastructure look like in that area? What kind of hardware do you need? What kind of software do you need? What kind of networks and support do you need? These are all important things. I'll just give you an example of when we were building infrastructure for Quick Collect, which is a product I created back at Western Union. We started on an old IBM 36. Now, many of you don't even know what an IBM 36 is. They've been around for a long time. But we began to, because it was all we had at that point, we began to build the infrastructure on an IBM 36. Well, in the early days of Quick Collect, when we were just getting started, that wasn't a problem. But I will tell you very quickly, we got to the point where we were disappointing all of our customers on a regular basis because the System 36 could not keep up with the volume requirements that we had in those days. So we originally started there, but we moved it over into our money transfer system, and we were able to keep up by doing that. So technology is really important. Make sure that you put enough horsepower in your technology and the networks and everything that you're doing to make sure that you can accommodate the growth that you anticipate. Supply chain. Where are you getting your raw materials? If you're building a widget or a gadget or some mechanical thing, how do you get your supplies to your production area? Are you getting your supplies from China? Are you getting your supplies from places where you might get cut off at some future point if there's not good relationship between the United States and that particular country? So make sure that you are building your supply chain where you can make sure you can get your raw materials to your plant for manufacturing if you're doing that. And also, I would tell you that when you're looking at an online business, make sure that the person you're hosting with is going to be around for a while. Next thing is to look at the human resources. Now, this gets to the recruiting and training and development and retention, the skill set of the people you're hiring. If you're building out your infrastructure, this is, as we said earlier, in the organization part, this is really one of the key things you should spend your time on. I always tell people that anybody at a vice president level or above, I wanted to personally talk to because I knew those people not only would be doing the job of vice president, which is an important part of the company and the corporation, but also they would be leading people, and I wanted to make sure that they were the right kind of leader. So I would talk to all those people. Quality control. As you're building out infrastructure, you want the best products and services consistently. So you need to put those things in place that make sure that those products and services are consistently delivered on time, on budget to your customers. And things like having feedback from your customers are important. When I have one of the businesses I run under Hillside is a cabin rental business. Every time you rent a cabin from Hillside, at the end of your stay is a one-page sheet, which basically gives you a place where you can rate us on the cleanliness, on the rate that you paid, on the infrastructure, on the furniture, all these things that are important to people when they stay at a location. And so at the end of every stay, I make sure that they have a chance to give me feedback. So as you build your quality systems, not only do you want your people to understand what quality is and how to create it, but also you want your customers to give you a grade on how your quality is going. You've all done the phone surveys from various players which ask you immediately to rate what kind of interaction you had with their companies. That's important. Sales and marketing infrastructure. This is the top line. This is where things come into your company, into your revenue stream. So you want to make sure that you have the best in class. My son was asked to run a company. He's into technology and startups, and he was asked to run a company as a VP of sales. He goes, well, no, I'll be your chief acquisition officer. I'll be the person that's in charge of all that, but I'm not just going to focus on sales. I'm going to focus on how we get customers, how we acquire customers, how we spend our advertising and all that. And so as you build out that organization, make sure you're the best in class. Make sure you understand how you go to market. Are you a innovator? Are you creating new products and services all the time? Are you a customer intimate company where you're creating this high touch points with your customers so you can have them talk to you and give you feedback on a regular basis? Or are you a price competitor? Do you provide the best price in the market? All those are important. Channels of distribution, brand awareness, customer acquisition, those are all important things as you look at how you build out your sales organization and the infrastructure for that. So what's next? Well, what does your physical plant or building look like? I mean, now, these days, it's not always the physical plant, it's the online presence that you have, and that's important. So what's next on the infrastructure? Well, you need to focus on your finance and accounting. Now, that simply means, we talk later about metrics and how we measure the business, but this is really the infrastructure behind that. Some people use a variety of different accounting systems and processes. But what you want to be able to do is to find something that your whole organization can understand where you are financially. If you're a public company versus a private company, you're going to have different audiences that want to look at different things. And what I would tell people in that area, and I told the guy that worked for me, a guy named Dan O'Brien that worked for me at Jackson Hewitt, I was not a great finance guy. You know, you got to admit when you run organizations, there's some things you do extremely well and some things you could do better. And so what I told the people that I hired that did things better than I did, which were a lot of them, Dan O'Brien, for example, was my chief financial officer. I said, hey, Dan, I don't understand finances at the level you do, but your goal in life is to make me look brilliant in front of the board. And Dan was one of those guys that could do that. It's hard to do, but he could do it. And when I got into a situation where one of the guys on our board was a guy who was the last man standing at a company called Arthur Andersen, and he wanted to drill down on numbers like you would not believe. Well, I didn't know how to do that, so Dan would jump in and solve those problems for me. So anyway, finance and accounting really important. Things like cash flow, planning, budgeting, how you're doing against your budget. All those things are important as you build the infrastructure of your team. And then, you use finances for decision making. I had a guy that worked with me by the name of Phil Clover. Phil Clover was my chief financial officer at Western Union in the commercial segment. And Phil would spend hours on hours, sometimes spend the night in the office drilling down on numbers. And I finally said to Phil, Phil, I appreciate the fact that you can drill down on these numbers at a much greater level than I can, but I don't need to understand this much data. I can't wrap my head around it. And that's one of the reasons I created the STAR model, is because people were giving me all this data, and I had to sort through and determine which was important and which wasn't. So the other thing in infrastructure is customer support and service infrastructure. Really important that you look at this part of your business. As you build it out, you want to make sure that anything you do that's part of your secret sauce, which we'll talk about later, you don't want to outsource that. For example, Jackson Hewitt, we could not provide training for all the number of new employees that we wanted to hire for the tax season. We would hire, thousands of new tax preparers for a tax season. Well, we couldn't do that. We didn't have the capability. We couldn't bring all those people on board necessary to train. So we hired a company that was an outsourcer that really could do that better than we could. So if it's part of your secret sauce or part of what you need to do, you need to make sure you hire somebody that can do it for you, but also keep in mind that those people that are working as outsourcers, some are good, some are not. And I can tell you from experience, and you may have had the same experience, in dealing with some of these customer service organizations, have a hard time understanding their culture's a little different than mine. It's John Smith, but really that's not their name. You're not getting the kind of support you need. I mean, for example, when I go to American Express and I'm paying a large fee every year to have the privilege of owning an American Express card, I expect American Express will do a little hand-holding for me, that they'll put the right people on the phone, that they'll appreciate the fact that I've been doing business with them since 1973, and that they will give me the kind of support that I need. So it's important as you set up the customer support area on what you do there and how you create the touch points for your customers and so on. I'll give you another example. Airbnb is a good example. When I go to an Airbnb listing, they usually provide more than I expect. So I think that's an important thing as you set up your infrastructure for your customer support. Also, after sales support, it's one thing to buy a product or service, but what does a customer get when he gets into a situation where he needs help? I think that's an important thing for you to spend time on. So I'll give you an example of that as well. I do business with a company called Broadway Bank here locally in Texas, and I've done business with a national company called Wells Fargo. And when I walk into Broadway Bank, they know who I am. They recognize me by name. They come, if they're available, they come and greet me. They tell me, appreciate your business, Mr. Yerington. When I go to Wells Fargo, I feel like I'm a stranger. It's like they rotate through their employees rather regularly. They have new people on the job all the time. I don't get customer service. I finally ended up ending most of my relationship with Wells Fargo Bank because I didn't get the kind of customer support that I thought I deserved after having done business with them for over 20 years. And I won't get into all the details except to say that as you get into the customer support part of your business, as you begin to build that segment of your infrastructure, be sure that you, one, keep all the important things about your business, your secret sauce, if you will, in-house. And if you do go outside to have some of the things that you can't do because of capacity or whatever, like we did at Jackson Hewitt, make sure you hire the best company you can find that will do that job for you. And then make sure you have customer input points where you can evaluate how they're doing, not just necessarily from what you're seeing on their reports, but how your customers are interacting with them. So a lot of important things on building out infrastructure. You've got to build a infrastructure that will support your vision. There's lots of things, a lot of twists and turns that may happen as you build out your organization, but make sure the main thing is it's supporting your vision for your company. Don't settle for mediocrity in any of the areas that I mentioned, customer support, marketing, accounting, engineering, any of those things. Don't rely on people that don't have their heart in it. And then consistently review each area of all the areas we talked about. Make sure that each of those areas have people in place that are as concerned and as focused on the business as you are. I spent a lot of time in the businesses that I ran. I spent a lot of time, extra hours in those businesses. And I always worried about the guy that was watching the clock at 5 o'clock that wanted to get out and get home, when I knew I was going to be spending probably the next hour and a half there and maybe having a sandwich at my desk. And, not spending the kind of time I wanted to with my family. So important that you get the good people in place, that you put the right infrastructure in place so that you can begin to do the things you need to do. Spend time with your family, spend time outside the job, all those things that are far more important than your job. I always told people that worked in my organization, there's got to be something more important to you than your job. Your friends, your family, your faith, whatever it is, make sure that you are spending the kind of time you need to outside the organization in order to spend time on those things that are important. And I'll leave you with that today. That's the infrastructure segment of the STAR model. We'll spend more time on that later, but I appreciate your listening today. Thank you.